I'm Benjamin Hall, and I'm searching for heroes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. We've got a really special guest on today, and her name is Jessica Cabeen. She's a principal in Austin, Minnesota, has been a teacher and a principal for very many years, and she's got an incredible blog and writes a lot about balancing the good with the bad. But what makes her story so interesting is her own story, and that is 13 years ago, she adopted a child, Isaiah, from Ethiopia. And she talks so interestingly today in this interview about what that's been like and what she has learned from that, the ups and the downs, and how it has made her a stronger person. But she's really open and honest about the experience. And I think that it is an interview that you are all really going to enjoy and really learn something from.
You know, really, I speak from the heart in regards to working through an adoption. And we had a traumatic situation where our adoption was taken away from us for a long time. We met our son, we held him, and then we lost him. Like, he was relinquished back to the government. And 6 months of my life, I was in what they call ambiguous loss. Like, I lost my son, but he was still physically there, but I couldn't hold him. I didn't think he was going to be with us. And it just the grief and the depression and the disconnect. And I think that's something too. I really thought I was going to be this parent. I thought, oh, I'm going to be this parent. And all of a sudden it was taken away from me. And I got so caught up in my position, I forgot about myself as a person. And so if I can't be a mom to this child, then why am I even here? And so that spiraling of shame and grief and sadness really, really got me into a pit of immense depression for a long time. And I had to work through that. And we had a miracle in the sense of that we were able to adopt him 6 months later. And I went to his home country. I met him. I brought him home. And then it's been a long journey of after the airport. I think people think adoption is this Hallmark movie or this Netflix Christmas series. And when you adopt or you foster, there's a lot of trauma behind that, and relationship building and navigating that can be really challenging.
So just to go into the story a little bit more, this was 12 years ago, and you were adopting Isaiah from Ethiopia. What happened? Why was it broken for 6 months? What happened
Absolutely.
there?
Yeah. And I think I can be, because that's my part of the story. Obviously, Isaiah has his part of the story of his journey, but we had met him in 2010. In February of 2011, we were matched with him in 2010. We met him in February of 2011. And then we were getting really close to the start of the school year. And I was sitting in a chair in an office that I still can't sit in that chair this many years later. And our adoption agency called and said the government has stopped all adoptions in Ethiopia. And he is going to stay in an orphanage till he's 18, and then he'll be released to the streets. He can't go back to his mom. He can't go back to his home neighborhood. It was over. And it was awful, Ben. It was, it was hard. I mean, I did everything right as a prospective adoptive mom and a middle school principal, like assistant principal. I was doing everything right. And yet this wasn't going to happen. And we ended up by October, an embassy worker came over to the United States and met with us and a few other families and went back and advocated to reopen the adoptions. And then we worked with our government here in the United States and was able to expedite it. And so he was taken from his orphanage I met him at in a very traumatic way and moved somewhere across the country to a different language, a different experience. And he was 4.5. And so by the time I got to meet him for the second time, he had stopped talking and had become more angry and hurt. And I'm really grateful, even to this day, we still have the same therapist that met with me before he came home and prepared me for the trauma that was going to be part of who we were going to be as a family as he came home to us. And it's been and we talk about, so the time between the time they found him again, which was right about Thanksgiving, to the time I brought him home, which was December 23rd, his body keeps score. I mean, this is 13 years later, and we still have a really hard time in this month between Thanksgiving and Christmas because while I'm excited, he's part of my family. He lost his family. He lost visiting with his mother, his grandmother, his home country, his food, his everything that was who he was for 4.5 years was gone. And now he's in this new environment. And so I'm so grateful for our therapist and the books that I read to really remind myself of as much as there's joy in this, there's sadness and immense loss for him too. He lost part of his family while he gained another part.
Yeah. And I mean, your story is really sort of sounds like one of the worst experiences that you could have in
Yes.
that period. But uh, the lessons, I suppose, that you have learned from that can be applied to so many other people if you're going through something that's difficult during the holiday season. And, everything that I've seen you write about and things you post are all about how you can sort of find that balance in Christmas, in this period between the good and the bad. I mean, you've said that you still find that period both joyous and very difficult. So how do you find the strength? How do you balance the great and the bad every Christmas as you come into it?
Oh, not well always, I'll be honest. I mean, there are days where I'm in my car crying before I walk in the door, or I might have to step out of a meeting or something because something just triggers or traumas, it's a reminder. But I think for me, I really have to focus on my own self-regulation and take more time for myself in this season where maybe I'm not as out and about doing a lot of parties or events or social occasions. I might just kind of withdraw a little bit more. My morning routine is essential for me. So I get up early in the morning before everybody else. I have my coffee. I do my devotional. I journal every day. Since 2016, I journal. And at the end of all my journals, I always write 3 things I'm grateful for and 3 things I'm looking forward to. And I can go back to this really dark point in my life and open those pages and still see I was grateful for sunshine that day, or I was grateful for a smile from a student. Like I could always find something to hold hope to. And then I always do some form of exercise. I mean, then it is -2 today and I was outside walking. It's cold. But I feel like for me, I need to have some movement in my life. I need good sleep. I need to eat regularly. It sounds very simple, but those basic needs are so important in the season. So then when the hard stuff hits, when some of the reactive attachment comes at me through my son or through other students I work with, I can respond in a more regulated sense. If that makes sense to you, it's taking, and here's the thing too, that is really challenging for people in a helping field, nurses, educators. We never take care of ourselves. We don't prioritize our own self-care and our own wellness. And so in this season, it's even doubly hard to say, I just need some time for myself so I can be better for others.
Yeah. Do you talk to Isaiah then about it as well? I mean, and you've got another son, Kenny, as well. And so
Yeah.
do you all, is it Bennett, do you sit down and say, look, this period is difficult. Let's talk about it. Do you find that open discussion helps?
We try. I mean, like we always open the door and we always remind ourselves that we prepare ourselves that this time is going to be challenging. There's going to be a lot of emotion with it. We keep very regulated with our routines. We don't have a lot of decorations up in our house. We have small, I mean, we still celebrate the season and we celebrate the birth but we don't do a ton of other activities because we just want to keep ourselves regulated. One thing that we have done every year since is we go back up and we get a picture at the airport. And it's been really interesting because, as you know, airports have changed quite a bit post-COVID, but we always go up right around when we brought him home and we take a picture. There used to be a tree for about a decade that we would take a picture with and we would constantly look at it. Now the tree's gone, but we still kind of stand in the same spot. And then we go out to dinner at an Ethiopian restaurant and we just talk about like, remember when you came home, like, remember when you came from Ethiopia to like -10 Minnesota and snow and TV and trees. And it was just, we kind of like to remember that part. And we try to remember the joyous parts of it too.
It's so, I've got to ask about how like Isaiah's doing. He's been here 13 years, well, he must is 17 now.
Yeah, 18. Yep, 18. Yep.
18. Is that a very difficult season for him as well? Like, does he, in one hand, he still and has forever remembered the joy in coming, but also the sadness at leaving?
Absolutely. And as much as you can tell, I'm extremely extroverted. He is extremely introverted, which has been really navigating that relationship too has been interesting. I always leave the door open for conversation, and sometimes it comes out of nowhere, and sometimes it takes a while. We were blessed about 2 years ago to go back home. And so he
Right.
was able to visit with mom, meet extended family. It was an amazing, they had a wonderful meal for him at his grandmother's house. It was kind of a prodigal son come home meal.
Gosh,
And now oh, go ahead.
what was that moment like when they met? I mean, it must have been difficult for you as well. I mean, adoption is fascinating because there are two
Two
mothers, I
moms.
suppose.
Yeah.
What was that moment like? I mean, how did he feel? How did you feel?
We prepped for that because I think, and again, we I don't do this alone. We have an amazing therapist. I have a therapist that walks us through a lot of what ifs. And I really just wanted him to know that he can love two moms. Like loving his birth mom doesn't mean he loves me any less.
Mhm.
And that's what we went into. Like I am doing the best to raise him for her. When
Yeah.
like this is, she wants him to go to college, she wants him to do these things. And so I'm honored and blessed to be a part of that, to help raise him for her and for him to know that he is Ethiopian and he has a large community back home. And luckily here in Austin, Minnesota, he has a community here. And so he has adopted into a community of Sudanese and Ethiopian residents that will make us meals, will invite us to family celebrations because we didn't want him to be the only person of color or the only Ethiopian in the room. So we've even in our church, in our faith life, and everything we do, we try to make sure that he's included. And I think that's also made me a better leader to really recognize that there needs to be so many different voices at the table. So, but I would say like when I met mom, tears, of course, hugs. And even though we had to go through a translator, I just wanted her to know I hope I served well.
Mm.
I hope I've served and helped develop the son that you birthed.
Would she, from her perspective, have offered, was it sort of thanks for raising Isaiah? Was it a
Mhm.
sense that, thank you for giving him a life in a country like America? Was there that discussion as well?
Yeah, there was a lot of just um, joy and pride, and we communicate every year. I send pictures, I give updates back and forth. So she's been following along, but he will be the first high school graduate this year in their family, and hopefully, the first college graduate too.
Yeah.
So we really do champion that, and it's been like when we were in the rural village for Isaiah to see too, like no no electricity, no, like the text the kids were using when they were going to school looked very different than what he had. And so he's never ever taken for granted what he has here. I think what it just made him see was the hope that he's giving his community back home.
Yeah. Were you aware, or were you aware of how difficult it might be before you adopted him? Did you know that might be a difficulty, or did it only happen because of that separation at the beginning?
No, I really fortunate that our agency really prepared us for almost like boot camps of reading books about working with older children, bringing them here, especially from another country, and making sure that we continue to instill that he's Ethiopian and American. I never want him to have to choose, and so how do we continue to? I mean, like we have a nativity scene that I got when I was really young, and now we have an Ethiopian nativity scene. So we constantly are trying to mesh the traditions together and do better every time to make sure that we make sure that's very inclusive.
Yeah. What was it like for Isaiah at the very beginning? 4.5 is an age where I mean,
Yeah.
I've got a 5-year-old, for example, and they are totally aware of what's going around them and their community and everything like that. So, I mean, moving from rural Ethiopia to Minnesota at that age must just have been what
Mhm.
an experience for him. What was that? What was those first few months like?
Oh, I can tell you even just I traveled solo to go get him because it was such a quick turnaround. Like it was less than a week of we have him and I'm flying out. So my husband was trying to get the house ready for him and anyway, so we flew back from Ethiopia and we had a layover in Amsterdam 2 days before Christmas. So you go from not having a TV, not having electronics to the airport in Amsterdam, and the sensory overload was that kid slept the entire way home. Like because he again didn't speak now because he had been just through the trauma of the adoption and then having multiple different dialects in the different orphanages. So he's just trying to take this all in and we see all these lights and sounds and I'm just thinking, "Oh my gosh, what did I do to this poor child? Like how did I, so he slept a ton and those
And you
first
couldn't
couple months.
communicate either, presumably. You weren't yet speaking English. He wasn't speaking English yet. So how was the communication happening?
Lots of visuals, lots of just development. This kid was wickedly smart and he still is to this day. But we did a lot of pre-teaching. I remember when I was in Ethiopia with him, I had bought a kit of like how to make snow. And so when we were in Ethiopia, I was trying to show him what snow was going to look like because we were going to come into snow as soon as we got home. And so just trying to pre-teach as I could. And then when I got home, I did take a maternity leave from my job. So I spent a ton of time just building routines, trying to incorporate visuals and pictures to connect with language, and then just a lot of experiences those first couple months.
He could not have liked the snow very much or the cold. The snow, I bet.
The cold, the wind, and we have a lot of wind up here, and it's almost like it takes his breath away. And I can still remember like his eyes are like, I can't breathe. And so it's just that like transition of weather and technology. And he loved to take apart batteries. He loved to take apart toys. He always wanted to know what was going on inside. So we did a lot of just lots of hands-on exposure and just time, lots of time and lots of patience to just uh, help him adjust. And we talk a lot if your listeners are, fostering or adopting attachment. He definitely latched onto my husband immediately, and then my son shortly after, and we're still a work in progress.
Yeah.
It's attachment's hard, and when you have another mom trying to attach to another one, so we've negotiated. I'm super affectionate. He's not at all, and so maybe a handshake, maybe a hug on a special day, and that doesn't mean he doesn't love me. It just means that love looks different for us.
Yeah. That's so interesting because I presume that's not the relationship you had in mind
Not at
for
all.
the adoption. So I wonder what that journey was like for you to realize. Did for a while you think this will change after a month? It'll change, and then eventually it didn't. And I can only imagine how difficult that was or still is.
It is. It is. And it's when I'm regulated well, I know it's not about me when I'm regulated. But when I'm not, it's hard. It's
Yeah.
challenging because I think as humans, we want that contact and that love.
Yeah. I wonder if
And
there
when it
is,
doesn't come, it's hard.
yeah. Well, you seem to be such a strong person. It's amazing for you to say that this is about him, um, and all the incredible things that you provided for him. And I wonder what it was that if that must be your motivation to go into this adoption. Presumably that is
Mhm.
why you wanted to adopt from Ethiopia rather than perhaps from within the US.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, again, we live in the better Austin, Minnesota. Like this community is incredible and the diversity within it. And we just knew that we wanted to adopt from Ethiopia because we have such a strong African community in this small rural town, that I knew that they would help extend the parenting that I couldn't do. And in turn now I have been able to support our African families navigate the school system and post-secondary and FAFSA and all the things. So it's been such a partnership. And so it's not just about us adopting Isaiah, it's about a community adopting us and making us part of a larger family that I never would have dreamed of 20
Yeah.
years ago.
Uh, Talk to me a little bit about what you have learned about, I suppose, your own emotions and having to to learn how to balance and instead of throwing everything into this, having to realize that sometimes you have to take a step back in a sense. Like,
Mhm.
what have you learned in that sense?
Uh, we just, as educators, we prioritize, and as parents too. I think too. I don't think it's just resident to educators, but we care so much for others that we don't take time for ourselves. And I try really hard, and I think you see that in my blogs and in what I'm communicating, that in order for us to lead well, we have to live well. And that really means taking care of ourselves. And for so long, there's been this narrative of in order to be good, you've got to be on all the time and you have to be everything for everybody. And that's just not realistic, and that's not sustainable, and that's not what life is. And so sometimes I'll like my husband will let me just go away for a night to just be by myself so I can be regulated and ready to respond to what's coming at me. And some people will look at that like, well, she should be with her family all the time. Well, sometimes I need to step away so I can come back and be better.
I can't help but think that it's brought some things to the family, but it's taken some things away.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's interesting for people who are listening who maybe were considering adoption to be very understanding about what any adoption from anywhere is like. That it can be difficult. It's not a simple, perfect adoption. There are always difficulties.
There is. And I think sometimes there's this again, like this Hallmark movie that you see that this is what it's going to be like, and it's not. There's immense loss in the relationship for that child, and in not honoring where they came from and who they were before they were with you, even if it was at birth, recognizing their identity outside of your family is gonna be essential for them as they become an adult. So it's not that I'm lesser than, I'm more because of who I was before I was part of your family.
More of our conversation right after this. Do you think that at the age of 4.5, there was he had sort of adopted some of the Ethiopian cultural or family, um, traditions, which perhaps were very different to the American ones, perhaps in terms of the role that the father plays versus the mother, etc.
Mhm.
And was that true?
Yes. Oh, yes. Some of his, I loved when he first came, and his dancing was beautiful. I think he'd be mortified now that I bring this up, but his dancing, his language, how he would sing and chant. And it was really wonderful because I think about 3 days after we came here to Minnesota, we were able to meet with two elders, that had lived in Ethiopia and now we're in the United States. And so right away, you could see his face. That he saw people that looked like him again. I think that was really heartwarming and reassuring to me that I was doing the right thing, because people would also be like, why is she spending her weekends in an African church? Or why is she spending so much time with this community? But to see my son see a reflection of him as an elder, and to see him like, okay, I see others like me here, was so reassuring. But it's a different community. And I think sometimes in America, we think, our family is nucleus. It's a mom, it's a dad, it's two children. Our family is very community based. Like we have aunts and uncles that are not biologically related to us, but are almost even deeper connected to us because of this.
Hmm. What would you say? I mean, if you had to talk of some of the amazing things that you gained, and some of the things that you feel you lost as a result, what would they be on both sides?
Uh, the loss of normalcy, the loss of what I thought this was going to be like, the grief of not having the same experiences as the other families, not having the same normalcy that I thought. That what I've gained though is just how I can better not only be a better mom at home, but be a better principal to students as we're upcoming on a holiday, and maybe helping share or tell their story. When teachers or other people are like, why are they reacting this way? And well, they're not all excited about being home for 10 days, or not sure where they're going to be for 10 days, or what they're going to eat, or, is mom going to be drunk the whole time? Like, I mean, there's so many layers for some of our students. And I think not if I wouldn't have had this experience with Isaiah, I wouldn't have had any understanding of what some of our families and our students go through. And I feel like I'm a much better advocator for them. And I try to see the kids who aren't seen. And I think
Yeah,
that was the same for Isaiah, is that I saw him in an orphanage where there were a lot of babies and a lot of younger children, but we saw him. He was the one that was meant for us.
it's such an interesting role as a principal because presumably you will know some of the children who might have a more difficult time at home or who don't come from such a balanced family. And it, do you, as a principal, know to talk to some children beforehand, or just have a quiet word with them? And
Mm-hmm.
how would you encourage? What words of not encouragement, but what words of sort of positivity or
Mm-hmm.
encouragement or normalcy would you give to them?
Yep. And then here's the really unique story is that Isaiah started his kindergarten year 6 months after he came to the United States, and I became his principal. I moved from the middle school and I was his kindergarten principal. And then I was his middle school principal. And spoiler alert, I'm up here at the high school as he's finishing. So I spent 6 years as the kindergarten principal. And so my current seniors were my first class of kindergartners. And so I've literally been with them from 5 to 12th grade. And knowing that, I can tell you that there are, like just today, there are two students, one who lost his mom when he was in kindergarten and another who lost his dad in kindergarten. And I just know that this is a hard time. So then they know like this is every year Miss Cabeen kind of swings in and just says, hey, I'm thinking of you. How's life going? Just trying to normalize the conversation. Do you need anything? And I always end with, I always love you. And they're like, I know you do. Like
Mm.
you've been stalking me since I was 5. And so just that normalcy of like, how are you? And how are things going? And just trying to say, and for those two, I can say, I know that your parents are so proud of you.
Mm.
And they are. They really are. And I still have the memorials from both of those funerals in my office as a reminder to me that they're an extension of family that's no longer here. And I'm here to help keep them moving forward through their
Yeah.
grief.
And I've seen on your blog you've written about, so you said somewhere that it's about sometimes revisiting past traumatic experiences, that the way to get through things is not just to put up a wall and pretend they didn't happen. Like that's the worst thing to do. I mean, you would say the opposite. You would say, think about them, be open about them,
Mhm.
try and understand them yourself.
Yep. And I think too, sometimes, especially our we don't always fully understand everything that our kids are going through today. And it might be very different than what we experienced. And to them, it might be, I've just never had my dad, but they don't know how to express to others or find a caring, trusting adult to say, this is a really hard time for me. Can you help me through it? So it's helping empower them with words and ways to advocate and to honor that, like, this is hard. And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say, I'm not happy right now. And even though culture and media and TikTok says it's a great time of year, it's okay for you to say not for me.
Mm.
And that's okay. And so that's what I'm hopeful with Isaiah and some of the other students is they can just be who they're meant to be around me, and I'm going to accept them however they are.
And you've written quite a lot also about ways to regulate tech use, finding boundaries with social media. And I imagine that actually they must probably make many problems, personal problems, worse than
Mhm.
beforehand. And so what do you think the effect of social media and tech is on children, and what can you do to push back against it?
Absolutely. Well, and I will just say, even as an adult, when we were going through our adoption, I had to like limit my time on social media because I kept seeing all these happy, happy families. And every time I saw a happy family, it was a reminder that I'm not. Like I read all these like airport pictures and all these families that we had followed along that they're completing their journey and we weren't. Every time I saw that, it was just another reminder of what I wasn't and what wasn't happening for us. So as an adult, I had to start to really limit what I was watching and what I was following and just really retreat for a period of time because I just couldn't be joyful and it was actually harder for me. And so with that, with students too, we really we're so lucky here that we don't actually have cell phones in our schools. We've kind of done the ban. And even when I was a middle school principal back in 2017, we didn't have cell phones. I think it just taking that social media away helps kids really regulate better and see the real world, because what they see on social media, what they see on Snapchat isn't always what's really happening, and the importance of building real relationships, play, interacting with others is so instrumental in building those skills to become a successful adult and not always retreating. And it's it's challenging, but it's been really nice to be able to tell kids, just put your phone down and let's have a conversation, or let's just, and even in our own house, we've always really had phones down, and I take phones at night so they don't have them in their bedrooms at night, things like that as a parent, just to put it away for a while and put pause on it.
Yeah. Dr. Amit Sut, he's from the My Clinic, and you've quoted him as well. And he says, and you put on your blog, accept that there will be chaos instead of trying to assert more control. And I think that's fascinating. I think it's such a good way. You've said it as well, like instead of just picturing this perfect life of control, accept that things will never work as you planned, that things will always be difficult. And if you do that, then they won't hurt or hit you as much when they are bad.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think people that work with me too know that I am not a perfect in any sense of the word, but I serve a purpose here, and I always am seeking feedback, and I'm really open about that. And like even this morning, the kids are like, "Miss Cabeen, I don't even know what you were thinking with your hair today, but it's not working for you." Like I think you just have to be really open to feedback and say this isn't okay, or reflecting on it and say, "Well, that didn't work. What are we going to do next time?" So I think just letting go of that perfection. And I think that's where kids get sucked into social media, and they see a 30-second snippet of something that's probably been edited and retakes multiple times, and assume that that's what life's supposed to be, instead of the real life mess that we live in day to day.
Yeah. Jessica, tell me a little bit about yourself, because look, I mean, you're a principal, you've been involved in education for so long, you made the decision to adopt. I mean, it's clear that you have always been someone who wants to help people around them, who wants to help build, make things better. Where does that come from in you? Because not everyone has that, and yet you clearly have a lot of that. So why do you have it? Where does it come from?
Oh, I just feel like that's my calling, is to serve and support. And it's interesting. It's finding that lost sheep. I don't know why. I just find the one kid that sits alone at the table, or the one kid that's not talking, or the one staff member that just looks like they're struggling right now. So it just being able to read people, and being present, I think is really important for me. My faith is really, really my foundation. And I think I every morning I just kind of look to what God's leading me to do and how to serve and support. And I think that really has been foundational for me as I continue to grow as a leader, is just continue to deepen my faith and just be ready for the next calling that's given to me.
Yeah. I suppose to finish up now, what would you say to people who are at the beginning of the holiday season, people who are unsure of what's coming ahead, who are not looking forward to it with open arms, but are a little bit worried about it? What would you say to them to encourage them?
That's okay. It's okay. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to not be okay. But it's not okay to not talk to someone about it or not seek help. Like I've said this, I say this to my staff, even on my calendars, they know when I go to therapy. Like I'm very transparent about the fact that I need help to stay healthy. So I think that's really important. And maybe right now in this season, the best you can do is sleep, eat, and just get up and get ready in the day. And that's okay. Like you don't have to be 110%. Like just if you can get up every morning and find 3 things to be grateful for, or 3 things to look forward to. That honestly sounds really silly, but that has gotten me through some of the darkest days in my personal and professional life. And when I struggle, I go back to those journals. Even preparing for this, I went back to some of those journals and tried to remember, like, okay, even in the darkest days when there was no hope for Isaiah to come home, what did I find to be grateful for that day? And so it just helps now with the little bumps in the road to go back and say, but even on this day, I was able to get up and find something to be grateful for. So And I talk a lot about that. Like a lot of research talks about the importance of gratitude in your own mental health. And I really can't express that enough. And staff know that too, that's just the way I work is I try to find the positive in everything and build from that.
Explain that quickly to me, that sort of when you talk about trying to find the gratitude in everything, how do you find the gratitude in something that is so negative or has created so many, so much bad impact?
Right. Well, and I think like even like our adoption story was very challenging. And because of that, I really walked away recognizing the importance of my own well-being and how to take care of myself, and then try to help others not only through adoption, but divorce, loss of a spouse, loss of a parent, like immeasurable or ambiguous loss, and helping people walk through that and go to the other side and say, you did it. It wasn't easy. It wasn't anything you wanted, but you've walked through it. And now maybe you can help the next person. And so just helping others walk through things and learn from it. You're not going to like it, but you can learn something from it and become better because of it. And I, as much as it was the hardest time in my life, I wouldn't change it because I think I'm a better human and a person because of it. And I don't think I'd be here, obviously, with you, if I wouldn't have had that happen to me. Yeah. And so looking way back at it, I'm really grateful for it. And I've learned a lot because of it.
It's funny because you say that, but you cry at the same time. And it's hard to judge whether you both wouldn't change it at all, but it's obviously really changed your life in ways you weren't expecting. And it's difficult to read, Jessica.
I think, but that's also I think emotions are hard, and I think I can be really sad about something and then laugh at the same time. And I also think that's something that we beat ourselves up about is how do we grieve? Like some people are able, like after we lost our adoption, I got up and I went back to work that day. And some people would be like, oh, why didn't you just take time off? Or why didn't you sit in your grief? And I'm like, I needed to get up and go. Like I couldn't just sit in the suck and I would have never gotten out of it. And so learning how you grieve and what you can go forward from is really, really important. And I think I try not to get emotional too much at work. And, you're a high school principal, you got to be tough, out there. But I also think it does show some vulnerability to others that there's no perfection here. And we all have hard days and we have to let that emotion out and then move forward too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're just great words for everyone listening to bear in mind. Look, what a great pleasure to meet you and to talk to you today, Jessica. I'm really honored that you came on. Thank you.
Like I said, I just cannot believe this happened today. And I'm so honored. And I really do hope that this helps somebody.
I do too. I'm sure it will. We'll be back in a moment with Searching for Heroes. Well, I found that absolutely fascinating. I really did. I suppose I've experienced it myself many times, is this idea that when you think that something is going to be one way, and you have an idea in your mind about what it will be like, and you think of the positives, and you find out that nothing is that easy. Things always are ups and downs, and that is so true for Jessica's experience. And so listening to her talk was just really interesting. But I think more than anything, she sends a clear message that it doesn't matter if things aren't as you plan. It doesn't matter if things are difficult. It doesn't matter if some things knock you down. There's gratitude to be found in all of them. And if you can talk about them and share those feelings and be open, and keep going, find reasons and things that you're working towards and that you respect, and you'll get through almost anything. And she really has done. And it sounds like she's just an incredible mother, but also an incredible principal. And her blog is absolutely fascinating. You can follow her on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at Jessica Cabeen, or her website, jessicacabeen.com. And of course, we speak about how social media and tech play too important of a role, but they are also incredibly useful. So thank you for listening, everyone. Take care. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcasts Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts. And Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.